Yeah. My name is Dani Briggs. I have been here since 2023 at Wellspring Church. I am currently the Youth and Operations Director here. And what brought me to Wellspring is probably something some of us are familiar going through. I was working at a church previously, but was let go. They were going through some changes and budget cuts, and so I was one of the people that was let go. And it was a rough season because I had been working at that place for almost 8 years. And so this was the first kind of big, drastic change or experience that I had. And I just didn't know where to start. But what I did was reach out to different people. And one of the people that I reached out to were Lisa and Vintage Foster. They have always been spiritual leaders for me. And talking with them, I thought that I was going to go back into like a corporate world setting. But Vintage had told me about this guy named Tony who happened to be looking for someone with skills that he has seen me have in the past. And so I made my way down here from the Bay and had a few meetings with Tony. Then eventually was sitting with the elder team and some staff members. And then I was meeting parents, and about a month and a half goes by and I started working here, and have been here ever since. So in Deuteronomy, there is what's called the Shema, which is a pretty well known Jewish prayer. I didn't know that part until recently, but I think it's well known. It's the heart, mind, and soul passage. But in 2024, I did a study on it through the Bible Project. Was just looking for something kind of simple. I was on vacation with my husband, and so we just wanted to find something to do together. And so we stumbled across that. I was familiar with it, but going through that study, I realized that as familiar as that passage was, I felt like I had missed so much of what it actually meant. And so the Shema goes, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." Right? Love the Lord with all your heart, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And going through that study, I realized, yes, there's this element of like we're supposed to love God, and we are to know that. If you're a little kid, you grow up kind of knowing this passage and being reminded of it constantly. But I was learning these original Hebrew words, and I just felt like something needed to change into my perspective about really what that meant. And so, right, the word "hear," which is Shema, so it's called the Shema prayer, didn't actually just mean to listen. It wasn't just to hear. It was that you would listen and respond. And so there was this invitation that we would be actively obedient, not just passively listening. And then it kind of broke down, okay, the heart. Well, in Hebrew, that word is not just about emotions, it's inclusive of our thoughts. What decisions are we making? And the mind wasn't, not the mind, the soul. Oh, I guess the mind, right? The mind, we kind of just think of like what our headspace is, but it went beyond that. And then you had our soul, which was like, I don't know, I grew up learning about the soul being kind of this spiritual entity that lives inside of us. But the Hebrew word talks about it actually being your whole essence, right? Your physical self, the breath that you breathe, the life that you have. It was all encompassing. And then strength, right? I think we often think about physical strength in this aspect, but that Hebrew word was talking about what resources do you have? What about your time? And so you had this kind of breakdown of all these words, and I realized it was more than just like love God, but that in our imperfection, that even in our weaknesses, there was still a choice. We can hear God's commands. We can hear about, the Beatitudes, and you can hear the calls that Paul had to, be patient, to not be afraid. But that hero Israel, the Lord is our God. The Lord is one, and to love him with your heart, with your soul, and with your strength was really about love God with all of who you are. And why I keep coming back to that is because sometimes I struggle with that, right? If I feel really sad or if I feel really broken, I feel like I need to put myself together. And this verse just felt like, no, just be obedient. Choose to give whatever you have. If it's your time in the season, if it's your thoughts, if it's the decisions, and you're worried and you're anxious, to give all of that up to Him, then I would experience really, truly what love was. And it just felt very freeing for me, and it just kind of really changed what my perspective about faith was.
Is there a moment, maybe it's related to that scripture, that changed your faith journey? Is there a moment that changed everything for you?
Yeah, actually, I would say a moment that really changed what my faith journey looked like was when I first said yes to working at a church. I had gone to graduate school, not graduate school, I'd gone to get my what's it called?
Undergraduate?
I'd gone to get my undergraduate degree in communications. Business ran through and through in my family, and that was our focus. And my first job was working in corporate, had worked there for a couple years. Stuff kind of came out, and I realized that I needed a life change. And so I had ended up saying yes to this ministry assistant position at a church. And it wasn't just talking to people about it, because trying to explain to people why you're taking like a $20,000 pay cut in your 20s to go work at a church does not make sense. And I had my own like anxieties and worries, but it was the tension that it created in my own family and the conversations that we had. And I can remember like looking at my dad and be like, but you always taught me to follow God, and like here I am, this is what I'm doing. And I realize now, kind of looking back at that moment, that was when faith wasn't just what my parents had. It wasn't just what I was learning from teachers or from spiritual leaders in my life. It was my decision to trust in God. And I think that perspective change is what adjusted the rest of my journey, that laid the foundation of like what it meant to look like for my walk to be about following Jesus and trying to follow in His example, and what I try to go back to. So whenever I come to that tough decision, how much am I worried about what others are thinking about me, or how much am I worried about how this might affect my family, and to trust that God is going to be in it. Seek first the kingdom, right? We know that verse, we know it well, but to actually walk it out is really difficult. But that is why it's the narrow path. And so that decision and choosing that and saying yes to God and having it really be the first time that wasn't just, I'm not going to say blindly supported, but relied on my own faith and my own trust that I was doing what I thought God was wanting me to do in that moment. And now I do think it created some great conversations with my parents, and I think it expanded both of our faith journeys and our understanding of what that means to be, called by God or directed by God. But yeah, that's kind of laid a foundation for me now. But that was a very pivotal moment of just seeing my faith become really mine. Yeah, I wish I could say it was all rainbows and sunshine, but that just really wouldn't be honest. Uh, I think if I were to say, like, this is what my prayer life looks like right now, I just think of all of David's Psalms where he's just broken and he's crying and he's desperate. Definitely moments of anger. So there's some, like go against my enemies here, but I think if I'm being very honest, it is very difficult right now to feel so desperate. And there's definitely been seasons in my prayer life that have been really good, and I can just feel God's presence. I'm just reminded of, we're being led into his pasture and he cares for us, and there's that tenderness. And then there's definitely seasons where it just feels like I'm in deep waters and I'm struggling just to hear God's voice, and it sounds like it's mumbling. And I think that's where I'm at right now. I have this unique experience of being a counselor, and one of the like in school, one of the things we talk about trying to perfect is the ability to sit in silence. And when you're the person who's like, yeah, I'm going to create the silent space, it feels really good. When you're the person who has to sit in silence, it doesn't. But God is, right, the ultimate counselor. And I have learned for myself, right, this is my experience, that sometimes in silence, it's God being the counselor in creating space for me to feel the uncomfort of my emotions, of my thoughts, the weight of experiences or choices. Not because he doesn't want to be speaking to me, not because that he's not trying to, right? Because even if you're just sitting there and talking with someone and they're silent, well, there's lots of other ways that they're communicating with you, and God is doing that. But to feel like I don't hear his voice is really hard. But then I just remember, like, God is my counselor. And in this silence, he's giving me room to process and to experience all that I'm experiencing, right? It's not that we can't be angry. It's not that we can't be sad. It's not that we can't be happy or joyful. He wants all of those things for us, but to be done with him. And so whenever I'm kind of in this space, or whenever I feel like I'm struggling to hear his voice, I know it's not everybody's first choice, but I love to read Ecclesiastes. I think it's an amazing book. It is a very hard read. When in the first chapter, it's basically like the world is horrible and like knowledge is so overwhelming, and here I am. But I think there's something about just that reality, right? Of just the hardships of life, how there's these seasons that change, and that's hard to navigate. And Ecclesiastes is supposed to have been written by Solomon, who's known for his wisdom. So then this weight of information and this weight of decisions and understanding, feeling like, well, it's all pointless, and the temptation to believe that, but how it ends with this realization of like, well, it is all for naught if I don't have my faith in God, if I choose not to believe that he's here. But in fact, I do. And so life now has purpose. And so when I'm kind of in a struggling prayer life, when I feel like I'm struggling to hear from him, I usually will go to Ecclesiastes so that I can be reminded of just how he is with us in all of those seasons of change. And that right now, he is my counselor. He is the one that consoles. He's the one that is with me. And when the time comes for him to speak, it will be done so loudly and clearly and with direction that I can trust, even if I may not want to hear it. But I think that's just the joy of like walking with God, right? And kind of trusting in that.